Tight ends. Look at these names. Bounce backs. Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, and Darren Waller. Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller. All right, I'm just going to ask a somewhat obnoxious Mark Andrews question.
Good.
If you look at his career, there is an obvious outlier. It's 2021, 1,361 yards, 9 touchdowns. That's his only season with more than 852 yards. He does have a 10 touchdown season in there as well, but why should I believe that he is capable of say 1,100 yards, which would be in between his breakout year and his second best year?
Well, we just talked about how we expect the Ravens to have the second most pass attempts per game in the Lamar Jackson era. Also, he had 847 yards last year in 14 and a half games when he played half of those games with a backup quarterback. So it's not a very big bridge at all from 847 yards in 14 and a half games to 1,100 yards in 17 games.
He was on pace for 960 yards in the 17 games. He left one game early with an injury. He really was bad after the injury. I mean, how much are you going to count that? I don't know if it was the injury or if it was the quarterbacks, but after he came back in his last 7 games, he was just horrible. He's on pace for 0 touchdowns, 872 yards.
Well, you say he left one game early during the injury. Like, he only played 10 snaps in that game. But the game before, I think he actually got hurt. He played almost the whole game hurt and only saw 2 targets in the entire game. And I think it was the only game that he played all year that he did not have a catch, but he played in.
Yeah.
I definitely think that is part of the bounce back. But more, it's just, I don't think that the offense or the situation is going to be as bad in the second half of the season.
Is it fair to, and I by no means think that he's better off with anybody but Lamar Jackson currently in the scheme of what the Ravens are looking at. But didn't his best stretch of production on a per game basis come with Tyler Huntley at the end of 2021?
I believe that is. I mean, I don't know how long of a stretch we want to talk about. He was awesome during that stretch. I think it was almost entirely volume based and not efficiency based. I think Tyler Huntley, that first time he became a starter, just threw it 12 times a game to Mark Andrews. But yes, that was the best stretch of his career.
I'll give you the numbers. 2021, he was the number 1 tight end in fantasy. He played 11 games with Lamar Jackson. His 17 game pace was only 136 targets, 87 catches. This is his pace with Lamar Jackson. 87 catches, 1,141 yards, 8 touchdowns on 136 targets. Without Lamar Jackson, he was on pace for 184 targets. So that's nearly 50 more, 145. But I think he was probably still more efficient. 145 catches, 1,765 yards, 11 touchdowns. That was his pace. He had a 29.4% target share. But let's just go to, because that was sort of answered at the beginning of this 2022 season, when people were like, well, Heath was saying, like, remember when Lamar Jackson was the problem for Mark Andrews? LOL. Because in the first 7 games, he was fantastic. Mark Andrews. I have 7. I included the 0 catch game. But even if you include that game, because I don't know that he got hurt in that game, I guess we'd have to look into that. 95 catches, 1,105 yards, 12 touchdowns on 143 targets with a 31.4% target share before his injury, before the game that he left with an injury. So I think that notion was kind of dispelled. He's never going to be as good as he was in those games with Tyler Huntley, but he still was so good. And that was with Lamar Jackson, like, being good, but not like he was throwing a ton, you know. So I don't know. I think the big question with Andrews is he a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick? What do you guys think?
I don't know if that's based on the player. I think it's based on how you want to build your team. So I would say it's a 3rd round pick.
I've got him at the end of round 2, but I'm the early tight end guy. I'd like to take Kelsey or Andrews.
You don't think he'll make it to the 4th round typically, do you?
No. Certainly not in analyst leagues. You might see it, with all the quarterbacks that get pushed up and, most other leagues. I wouldn't be surprised if, a few of those he crept into round 4. 10-team leagues for sure.
he's a round 2 pick in the consensus rankings. He's the number 20 overall player in the Fantasy Pros PPR consensus rankings. Mark Andrews is ahead of A.J. Brown, Breece Hall, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and more, and many more. Probably a little early even for Heath.
I've got him 20th.
Never mind. Well, then you kind of lied because you said you had him at the end of round 2. So I don't think that's the end.
Okay. Okay.
What's the end? I think pick 22 is the end of round 4. The beginning of the end.
Well, it depends. Are you splitting it up in half? Are you splitting it up in thirds? Are you splitting up in quarters?
There's a beginning, a middle, and end. Obviously, the beginning is the first 3 picks. The end.
No, the first 3 picks are basically the first round.
No, they're
that's basically the first round. It's no difference between the 10th, 11th, or 12th pick and the first, second,
well,
third
there's a beginning, a middle, and the end. You got to go by force.
No, I don't think you have to go by force. I knew you were going to go there. The beginning is 3, the end is 3, the middle is 6.
This exact argument is why I say that you're now middle-aged.
Why is that?
Because you're in the middle of your life.
Which is bigger than the beginning and the end.
Are you turning 40 this year?
No, 39. We'll do a big to-do for my 40th. Sure. Kyle Pitts is another bounce back.
This time.
but even still, if you were expected to live until 90, once you're past 30, you're in middle-aged.
Yeah. Well, sure. Actually, by my definition, once you're past, I think 20. Kyle Pitts is a bounce back. Yeah, he was bad. He was bad last year. This is Heath's, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, I think he's just not going to be as awful as he was last year. He can bounce back. Maybe. I think he was also a breakout candidate for me. So I'm just cheating all the way around. But I would expect that the yardage is going to be much closer to what it was his rookie year. The catches will be closer to what it was his rookie year. And the touchdowns will be a career high, which means he'll have at least 3.
Yeah. Fantasy football stresses me out a lot. Do I want a lot of Kyle Pitts or do I want none of Kyle Pitts? I could be in either camp. I could see compelling arguments for both sides. Right? I mean, the compelling argument for him is that he's Kyle Pitts. We know he's great. He had over 1,000 yards, over 1,100 yards as a rookie. That's a record. And the downside is he's on Atlanta. They're going to run a lot. They might have a bad quarterback. And Drake London. We like Drake London too. How are they going to have 2 good pass catchers? So if you had to choose one side of that, I want a lot of Kyle Pitts or I want none of Kyle Pitts. What side are you closer to?
It's entirely dependent on cost. I want none of Kyle Pitts for 2 years in a row because it's cost me a 3rd round pick to get him. If it costs a 5th or a 6th round pick now, especially 6th, then yeah, I want a fair share, maybe even a little extra. And I do think there's a way that a pass offense can be low volume and still produce 2 good pass catchers. And the way that is if they throw 25 to 30% of their passes to each of those 2 guys and 50 to 60% of their passes to 2 guys. We've seen the Chiefs do that with Kelsey and Tyreek Hill in the past.
Well, the Ravens are the best example, right?
The Ravens. We saw the Vikings do it with Thielen and Diggs when they were more run heavy. Like, it's possible. It's just that nobody else gets any targets. And as the team's currently constructed, nobody else deserves to get any targets.
It's a good point. Jamie, Darren Waller, a bounce back for you on a per game basis. He actually was, I think this might surprise people. He was the number 7 tight end on a per game basis, but overall he was number 31 and he only played 9 games and really only 8 games. 1 game he barely played. Okay. What do you expect from Darren Waller this year with the Giants? Other than at least an NFC championship run?
I mean, he's going to the best quarterback he's ever played with. No, I think, again, a lot of it is health related, just basically staying on the field. But I think he's, going from a situation a year ago where he was not going to be the leader in targets to a team where he might be the leader in targets right now. I'd be surprised probably if he's not the leader in targets, So I'm excited about the situation for him. I think this is going to be, as Heath said, the Giants were one of these teams that we looked at and said they're trying to get a wide receiver. And I'm not sure they're done. I think they could still draft somebody, but Wan'Dale Robinson's coming off an ACL tear. They bring back Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins. It's just not a very exciting, explosive group aside from what he might be, still be able to do. So I think he's an easy guy to look at and say he's got top 5 potential once again.
We have a comment in the YouTube chat from 100% Pure Mustard. And he says, Waller is trash.
Yeah, well, mustard is trash.
Mustard is trash.
I like mustard a lot.
Mustard's great.
Mustard sucks, but
Mustard sucks.
mustard sucks.
What do you put on hot dogs?
Ketchup.